Episode 55, Queen Lavaria Koopa. It was early evening over the resistance camp in the Bean Kingdom. Shadows fell over the tents as the huge Mushroom Kingdom battleships, with star-shaped figureheads and a superstructure designed to look like Peach's castle, descended to the ground. There were already dozens in the air, and more were coming. The Mushroom Kingdom was summoning all its strength, readying itself for the battle which would decide everything. Luigi loitered around one of the storage tents, which was being used as a temporary prison for Cammy. The air was cold, but in a comfortable rather than chilly way. Toadette walked through the tent flap, glancing at Luigi.
"She's not going anywhere, not until she recovers her strength,"
Toadette replied.
"She's made it clear she's planning to teleport out as soon as she can, though." "Does she know about Mario?"
Luigi whispered. Toadette shook her head, and Luigi breathed a sigh of relief. Good. No need to get Bowser's blood boiling.
"Any news on why she was here, so far away from the other Koopas?"
he asked.
"She's told me a bit,"
Toadette replied.
"Supposedly she's on a secret mission, for Emperor Bowser, except that nobody in Koopa Central knows about it, not even Bowser himself. She claims she's been a missing person for years, although it's her goal to get back to the Citadel as soon as possible."
Luigi nodded.
"I see,"
he replied. Something didn't seem right about this. Luigi had known little about Cammy Koopa. Even Mario had only fought her once. However, he had heard that she was one of the most intelligent members of Bowser's entourage, the one who had been responsible for much of the Koopa Kingdom's political dealings since King Bowser had been woefully incompetent at anything aside from burning things down. Cammy might represent an element of the unknown, and that wasn't something Luigi wanted this late in the game.
"I'm going to see her,"
he announced.
"Luigi? Is that wise?" "Don't worry,"
he smiled.
"Right now, she's so tired, she couldn't even shake off a micro Goomba. I don't have to be afraid of her."
The Toads, ever good hosts, had provided Cammy with a sleeping cot amidst the crates and barrels. On it, the aged Magic Koopa sat, looking as crotchety as ever.
"Luigi,"
she chuckled.
"Now that I see you up close, I can see you've aged. Is that some gray in your mustache, eh?"
Luigi rubbed it self-consciously, before ignoring the jibe.
Cammy,"
he said, clearing his throat.
"We have some questions to ask you. Why were you in the Bean Kingdom? Wouldn't you be with Bowser?" "Oh, I will, soon,"
Cammy replied.
"There were just a few things I needed to clear up first. Do you know, Luigi, the truth of things?"
"Huh?" Luigi asked.
"You deserve to know, you know,"
Cammy replied smugly.
"The reason why this whole messy chain of events started. The reason why you fought his foulness so many times in the past, and I suppose the reason why the Battle of Toad Town happened and the Koopa Empire began."
Luigi narrowed his eyes.
"It's Bowser's fault,"
he said.
"Don't try to blame me and Mario." "Oh, I won't say my dear Koopa King is innocent."
Cammy grinned.
"He could have saved everyone a world of pain if he had just got over that childish crush of his. But someone predicted this. Somebody set these events in motion, pushed you, your brother, and Bowser into conflict. Have you ever wondered, Luigi, who the Koopalings' mother was?" "Their mother?"
Luigi had to admit he had no idea. There had been gossip in the Mushroom Kingdom about the subject. Some claimed Junior and the others were adopted. A more far-fetched theory was that they were clones.
Yes.
Kami replied.
Queen Laveria, the jewel of the Koopa Kingdom, a bright flower whose life was cut too short. She was the real one Bowser loved, you know, but she died, and, well... You know what happened next? Bowser went to kidnap Peach.
Luigi realized.
Exactly.
Kami laughed.
You're catching on, Luigi. You're smarter than you look. Someone, has been manipulating all of us, and, luckily for you, I know who.
Luigi was suspicious. Curiosity was flying through his brain, but this was Kami Koopa. She couldn't be trusted.
How?
He peered into Kami's spectacles.
These past months, I've been investigating Laveria's death.
Kami replied.
I tracked her to the old castle, where Laveria lived with Bowser and where the Koopalings spent their early childhood. She was murdered in the forest nearby, and through careful deductions I discovered the exact location of the crime. I cast an old spell, one that harnesses the powers of the star spirit Clevar, which allows me to receive a vision of that area at a certain point of time in the past. I've witnessed the Queen's death with my own eyes, Luigi.
She grinned in a wily fashion.
Would you like to take a look? This is very important, after all. One could say this was the catalyst of everything that happened in our lives.
Luigi took the bait. Was this a Koopa trap? He needed to be cautious, but Kami's words were too enticing.
Show me.
He asked.
All right, then. Call your friends, I don't mind. You deserve to know this just as much as Lord Bowser does. Keep what I'm about to show you in your mind, idiot. I'm about to reveal a decades-old conspiracy.
A few moments later, the supplies tent was packed. Peach was there, along with Daisy, Toadsworth, Toadette, and the Toad Brigade, the Wario Brothers, Cobal, Strike, K. Rool, Peasley, and every Resistance member of note. Mario wasn't there. He was still exhausted, and Luigi and Peach had decided that regardless of where Kami stood in the conflict, nothing could be gained from having her learn of Mario's survival. Kami held up her wand and waved it around, causing glowing green magic Koopa runes to circle the tent, bathing them in a magical glow.
Close your eyes, she said. I need you all to be focused for the spell to work.
Luigi squeezed his eyes shut. His heart was beating. A moment later, Luigi found himself in the decaying forests of Dark Land. For Dark Land, Queen Laveria thought, the dead forest near the old castle was surprisingly cool. It was a welcome relief from the pits of lava that filled the castle. She understood that fire and lava held a lot of reverence in the Koopa culture, but it could be very uncomfortable to be around all the time, especially compared to her cool mountain hometown of Shell Shock Point. Really, the old castle was no place to raise a family. It was too drafty, and all the pits of fire made her nervous. Her children seemed to enjoy it, though. She had long laughed as she watched Larry and Morton chase each other around statues of long-dead Koopa kings, Roy swing over a pit of lava on a chain, or little Bowser Jr. stand on one of the highest towers to look out over the great lava sea. Her husband personally preferred his other castles, but they were too egotistical for Laveria's tastes. She did not want to raise her family in a giant monument to her husband's ego. The gravel path made crunching sounds under Laveria's feet as the Koopa Queen made her way through the path, the dead trees reaching above her, black branches covering the dark sky. To some it might have been an unsettling sight, but not to Laveria. There was nothing frightening about the forest near the old castle. It was just a long dead forest, its trees withered and its grass dry, but still preserving a small amount of beauty. You had to know where to look. There was a particular pond Lavaria liked quite a bit. There were still a few pale white flowers growing by its side. Wendy quite liked it whenever she was given one as a gift, although Lavaria knew she ought not to give her only daughter too many things. Bowser seemed inclined to spoil her, although Lavaria knew that wasn't the proper way to bring up a young girl. A crow caught above her, its wings flapping overhead as it passed. Lavaria yawned. After she got back from his evening stroll, it was time to go to bed. Raising 8 hyperactive children was tough. At least Bowser seemed to be less stressed, though. It had been hard to him, coming to the throne right after his father's war had come to a violent finish. The Koopa Kingdom's resources had been depleted after they had been defeated by the Mushroom Kingdom. There were many people in the kingdom who had thought that the monarchy needed to end after King Morton's warmongering ways had brought the nation to ruin, while there were others, nobles and military officers for the most part, who thought that there was no need for the war to die with Morton. Lavaria still remembered how chaotic things had been when she had been a girl, how there had been several factions in the Koopa Kingdom operating from different keeps and bastions, each one vying for the throne. It had taken the wisdom of Kamek, Lavaria knew, to keep Morton's heir on the throne. Kamek had been a low-ranked Magic Koopa in the years of the war, a simple caretaker for Prince Bowser whose magical genius had gone unnoticed. All the powerful players in the political infighting that occurred after the war with the Mushroom Kingdom hadn't even acknowledged him as a threat. But through intelligence, deception, and a touch of magic, Kamek had slowly dismantled the rival factions until Prince Bowser came of age. By the time Bowser was crowned the one true Koopa King, here in the old castle which had been built over 1,000 years ago by the first king of the Koopas, there were few who would not see him on the throne. Even as a teenager Bowser had made short work disposing of the rest of his rivals, especially since the army by then had been rebuilt at full strength. Even though admittedly Kamek and Cammy had more doings in politics than her husband, even after they had married she remembered Bowser's angry rants about how difficult it was to get things done in the kingdom. But that was only a bad memory. The Koopa Kingdom was completely unified, at peace, and stable. Peace treaties had been signed with the Mushroom Kingdom, that had been a tough one, especially considering the mischief Bowser had wreaked against the kingdom in his youth. They were probably desperate for allies, though, with the Shroob invasion hitting it only a few years after the war's close, the Mushroom Kingdom had no military and less resources than most nations. Lavaria smiled as she continued walking deeper into the forest. She could smell ash, as one always could in dark land, but she could also smell earthier scents, which relaxed her. Her husband might be a hot-headed Koopa who liked to think of himself as a tyrannical warlord, but he was really very kind and sweet-hearted. He deserved to live a good life with his family, not a life of war and violence, no matter how much he liked to boast about how he had been fighting dinosaurs since he was 4 years old. If the star spirits were willing, though, that was what would happen. Suddenly, as Lavaria continued up the path, she saw a figure standing in front of her. The figure was a Koopa, who was dressed in a stylish, if a bit old-fashioned white suit and hat, bathed in a ray of light from the full moon that shone down from above. As she approached, the Koopa glanced up and pushed back the rim of his hat. He smiled.
"Good evening, my queen," he said smoothly. "My name is Skulls Fortescue. Beautiful day for a walk, isn't it?"
Lavaria smiled, although she couldn't help but to be a little concerned. This forest, after all, was not often traveled. Nobody entered Dark Land except if they had a reason to visit one of the many fortresses that dotted the volcanic wastelands. Nobody hiked these trails except her and a few servants. She certainly would have noticed if a man like this was staying in the castle.
"Good evening to you, sir,"
she replied gracefully.
"This is a bit remote for a hike, isn't it? It's rather late. Do you have a place to stay?"
Skulls smiled.
"I don't plan to be here long,"
he replied.
Why, the only reason why I'm here in this dismal wood is because I wanted to see you.
Laveria's heart began to beat. She took a step backwards. She was in danger now, and she knew it. She was too far away from the castle to call for guards, and while her tutors considered her quite a promising Magikupa before she had hung up her robe to become queen, she had never quite managed to learn how to teleport long distances. A few meters, maybe, perhaps even enough to take her out of this Kupa's sight. But she couldn't put her faith in it.
Why do you want to see me?
She asked, managing a polite smile.
If you had wanted to, you could have gone over to the front gates and asked for me. For a queen, I'm not really too busy, after all.
Skulls grinned. But it was a cruel, evil grin now. He covered his right eye with his hand. When he removed it, it was glowing orange.
I'm here to see you die, my queen.
With that, he stretched out his right hand. Laveria thought fast as she locked her wrists together, summoning a violet barrier. Laveria felt an invisible force pushing against her, kicking up the dust and ash of the forest floor and straining against her even as she dug her feet into the ground. Skulls grinned and flicked his wrist. Without warning, the ground beneath her rumbled before exploding, flinging her into the air. Laveria felt herself get tossed through the air, through dry, broken bushes, and as she turned around, she saw Skulls standing underneath her, grinning with his right eye shining like a red-hot flame. She wasn't dying here tonight. Laveria grit her teeth, feeling power rush through her. She felt a tugging at her body and a cold chill as her vision became obscured for a moment, as if by fog, before she blinked, now standing on the ground in a grove of dry bushes. Laveria shuddered. She had always hated teleportation. The Kupa Queen whizzed around, easily noticing the white hat of her enemy, and stretched out her right hand, summoning her wand with a puff of magic. She was breathing heavily. For all her talent, she had never been in a fight before. Kami and Kamek had taught her the spells, they had even done drills before, since the Magikupa advisors had thought it prudent for a queen to be able to defend herself.
You were right,
she thought to herself as she spun her wand around, charging up a magical blast. Laveria burst from the bushes, launching a red-colored fireball towards Skulls that trailed magical runes behind it. Skulls spun around, holding up a finger and stopping the blast right in its tracks, making it disappear into weak red sparks. Still smiling, Skulls flicked his wrist, and Laveria felt something slam into her, knocking all the air out of her lungs. It sent her flying through the air, crashing into a tree with a force that cracked it. She saw Skulls advancing towards her slowly, but before he could do anything, Laveria had teleported behind him and launched another blast at his back. Displaying superhuman reflexes, Skulls ducked under the magic bolt and stretched out his hand. But Laveria had already teleported away and appeared hovering above, launching another fireball down at her enemy's head. Skulls seemed to expect that, and he swiped his arm through the air, reflecting the glowing red blast back at Laveria, who warped away just in time. They continued like that, Laveria teleporting around the forest glade, raining magic bolts down on Skulls, who casually blocked and dodged without seemingly expending any energy. He had failed to get a hit in, though, so that was something. Laveria felt exhilarated, like she had never felt before. Skulls was stronger than her, she could tell that, so she doubted she'd be able to defeat him. But if she could keep him occupied long enough for her disappearance to be noted, some guards would stumble upon her and Skulls. Between her husband and his two Magikupa assistants, Skulls was finished. Skulls lashed out with his right hand again. Laveria teleported away, and the force meant for her cracked a tree, the noise echoing through the dark forest. Laveria whirled a magic blast in his direction, only for Skulls to coolly sidestep it. But Laveria was starting to figure her enemy out. Every time Skulls used his power, he only used his right hand. That meant that he could only use the hand on the side his eye was glowing. Skull's left was weaker and undefended. She saw an opening and attacked. One blast at his right, which she expected Skull's to block. And then another aimed at his left, which caused his eyes to widen in shock as he leapt out of the way with less dignity than usual. Seeing her opportunity, Laveria raised her glowing wand to the sky, calling down jagged bolts of lightning to strike Skulls and fry him. A moment before the bolts hit, Skulls, sensing the danger, retreated into his red shell and spun away, as the lightning hit the ground, churning up the earth and knocking down trees with a fiery explosion. Skull's shell went flying through the air as it rebounded against a tree and hurtled towards Laveria, the white-clothed Koopa emerging from it. He adjusted his hat with a smile as he skidded to a stop, trailing light from his right eye.
"You're surprisingly good,"
Skulls said.
"The rumors of your prowess at the Wisenheimer Academy of Magic were not exaggerated."
He covered his left eye with his hand and withdrew it. Both her eyes were glowing now with a fierce light.
"I didn't think I'd get so much of a workout from this fight."
Skulls stretched out his right arm, sending the same force at Laveria, who hurriedly threw up another shield. Skulls just smirked as Laveria strained against the rush of power, casually flicked his left hand. An entire tree uprooted, flying through the air towards Laveria. The Koopa Queen already had both of her hands clasped around her wand to block Skull's magical attack, and so was unable to block the flying tree. It crashed into her, knocking her to the ground. She went spinning on the back of her shell over the forest floor, dizzy and disoriented.
"You know, my list of crimes is long enough to sound like a proper speech, but I don't believe it includes regicide."
Skulls smiled as he raised both hands into the air. There was a rumble as more trees popped out of the ground, shaking ashy dirt from their roots.
"It will be a welcome addition to my collection."
Laveria leapt to her feet as a tree went spinning through the air. It hit her hard in the chest, causing her to drop her wand, launching into the air. Laveria felt all the strength leave her body. Humming merrily, Skull slashed his hands through the air, causing trees to launch right and left, pummeling the queen until she felt as if every bone in her body had been broken and cracks ran down every inch of her ruby-red shell. Through blurry eyes, Laveria saw another great trunk spinning towards her as she flew through the air. No. She refused to die. She had a husband and 8 wonderful children waiting for her at home, who could cry if she was suddenly killed at this strange Koopa's hand.
"Kami, Kamek, lend your strength."
She though, as with her last bit of strength, she conjured her broom in her hands and gripped it tightly, rocketing away from the tree in last minute and soaring into the air. The moon shone high above her, breaking through the dark clouds. Far away, over the black grasping arms of the dead trees, the old castle stood on its lonely cliff stretching into the lava sea, accessible only by a jagged rocky path making its way over the lava. Tall, shadowy mountains stretched into the clouds beyond, dark and mysterious. This was her kingdom, and Skulls was a threat to it. If he wanted to kill the queen, what he planned could only mean utmost destruction for the entire Koopa kingdom, her beautiful country whose scars had only just healed. More trees whizzed past her, blowing at Laveria's fiery red hair, but she dodged them. She hadn't mounted a broom for years. It was amazing how all her old skills seemed to be coming back to her. Laveria stared at the mighty stone keep, the spiked rings around its towers as inhospitable as ever. Ugly and crumbly it might be, the old castle was her home. If she could avoid Skull's attacks long enough to reach it. Laveria glanced down. Propelled by some magical force, his eyes shining, Skulls was leaping into the air. He stretched out his right hand, and bits of rock and earth flew into it, condensing together until they formed into a long, dark blade of steel. She whizzed around and sent a glowing red magic bolt flying his way, but Skulls slashed through it with his sword before going into a flip. It happened too fast for Laveria to stop it. The sword cleaved through her broom as it was butter, causing Laveria to go falling to the ground.
Teleport! I have to teleport!
Laveria thought to herself as she fell, looking up at the dark sky. But something grabbed her first. Laveria found that she could not move, not even budge a tiny finger. She hung suspended in the air, above a tall pine tree that was one of the few in the dark forest to have leaves. Skulls lightly landed on a tree opposite her, holding out his left hand. He dropped his sword as if it meant nothing, and grinned at her.
"A merry dance, of that I won't deny,"
he said in a voice that was both cold and charming.
"King Bowser chose a spirited bride. It's almost a pity to rid the world of such untapped potential, but, well, such is not to be. I would say,
may we meet again in the next life."
But the lofty heights of the over there were not made for a Koopa as black-hearted as me.
His glowing eyes narrowed.
No.
Laveria thought to herself. Memories flashed through her mind. A class outing at the Magic Academy to a town not far from here, all the excitement and hubbub at the thought of seeing the royal procession.
Huh? You really think you've got something stronger than my fire, huh? Let me prove it to you, you third-rate Kamek wannabe. This is what real flames look like.
Her spell had been simple, an ice spell she had mastered in her first year. Prince Bowser, heir to the Koopa throne, only son of Morton the Conqueror, the last of a dynasty that stretched back until the days before the war with the Shadow Queen, stood in the street, his eyes bugged out, as the mighty flames he had been about to spew from his mouth were abruptly turned into an oversized icicle wedged between his jaws.
So much for your
real flames.
If it weren't for those ugly spikes on your shell, you would look more like a playground bully than a prince, Your Highness.
She had been so sassy back then, when she was little more than a girl, and he had been even more bull-headed than he was now. Who would have thought that that meeting would have led to evenings stolen under the watchful eyes of the stars, a secret courtship away from Kamek's scheming? He had wanted Bowser to marry a woman from a powerful family, of course, and a royal wedding in the grand cathedral that had left even the stubborn old Magic Koopa crying tears of happiness. It was a beautiful dream, and it would not end like this. Skulls was clenching his hand into a fist. His eyes were cruel and heartless, killer's eyes.
"Wait, Skulls!"
The voice came from below. It was deep and authoritative, but it was no one she recognized. Surprisingly, Skulls relaxed, although he did not loosen his magical hold upon her. There was a flash of orange, and a man leapt onto another tree to the left of Skulls. Laveria could scarcely believe her eyes. No. This couldn't be possible. The man was human, and he wore an orange trenchcoat over blue overalls. He had a mustache and a large nose, and on his head was an orange cap with the letter A. He glanced at Skulls with a chiding look.
"If you disintegrate her, there will be no body for Bowser to find, and that will defeat our purpose."
Antonio, the great enemy of the Koopa Kingdom, who had killed thousands of her people in the war, the man who had wiped entire towns off the map with a simple wave of his hand. Impossible. He was dead, slain in single combat with King Morton.
"You?"
She managed to get out.
"How?" "Morton was a single-minded fool,"
Antonio said softly.
"He let ambition blind him, turning him into a shell of the man I once knew. When both of us were at the end of our strength, surrounded by the wreckage of our fight, he did not possess enough will to live, for his ideals were not strong enough. I was different."
Out of the corner of her eye, Lavaria could see the castle. If all the stories she had heard about Antonio were true, he could obliterate it and her children with a snap of his fingers.
"What do you want?"
she shouted.
"Whatever it is, do whatever you want with me. My family has no part in it."
Antonio smiled.
"Oh, rest assured, Queen Lavaria. I am only here for you."
He stretched out his hand, and a blinding spear of light appeared, hovering slightly over his white glove. Lavaria knew it was the end for her. There was no way she could break out of Skull's magical grip. Bowser's face flashed through her mind.
"Whatever you're planning, it won't work,"
she said harshly.
"Even if I die here, my husband and my children will stop you." "Stop me?"
Antonio smiled.
"When the earth shakes at their footsteps, when people faint and grow ill when they hear they are near, when the mountains crumble from their blows and their flames stretch into the depths of space. That is when I will fear, Lavaria. Never before." "It was a good life, Bowser,"
Lavaria thought.
"Short, too short, but happy. I hope you'll be all right alone, love. Don't let rage and hatred consume you. Don't."
With a subtle gesture, Antonio let the light spear fly. Luigi blinked as the lights of the tent came flooding back. Kami Koopa was looking at him with a solemn expression. Luigi wiped away a tear from his eye. He had never thought about what Bowser had had to go through. The tragedy in his life which had driven him to attack the Mushroom Kingdom. And Antonio.
"Yes, Luigi,"
Kami said.
"That man is your father. He was always secretive, which is why nobody knew for certain, but my research and the physical similarity you bear to him confirms it."
Luigi nodded grimly. He had always known his parents had been killed in the Koopa War, but the idea that his father was alive and secretly plotting the destruction of everything.
"That Koopa,"
Cobal spoke up.
"Skulls. He was the guy who attacked us at Stoneshell Prison. Wow. Does that mean Luigi's dad has been behind all of this, from the beginning?" "Quite possibly."
Kami nodded.
"That's why I felt you had to know, even if we are enemies."
She slid from the crate she had been sitting on and began to slowly make her way towards the tent flap.
"Considering the favor I did for you, it's only right to allow me to leave, right?"
Wario moved to stop her, but Luigi put his hand on Wario's shoulder.
"She's right,"
he said softly.
"Let her go."
Kami vanished into the night. Luigi looked away from Wario and at Princess Peach.
"Bowser,"
Peach said softly.
"I never knew. There's something bigger afoot."
Toadsworth huffed.
"If Antonio, the old war hero, is really behind all of this, he won't sit by and watch us mess up his schemes."
"No," Luigi replied.
"But it's too late to turn back now. We have Mario, and we have an army that can challenge both sides of the Koopa army."
He took Daisy's hand and smiled.
"Let's finish this."
The Seven Stars main headquarters was among the most secret places in the world, but there was nothing so secret it could escape the eye of a man as skilled as Larry Koopa. Following the unpleasant death of his elder brother Roy, Larry silently departed Ludwig's palace by way of magic portal, allowing him to easily end up back in his personal home in Hooktail Castle. It only took a few hours of research there to narrow down that Seven Stars conducted its operations from the Cap Kingdom. Larry took a Koopa cruiser towards the mysterious island nation. He piloted it himself. His old subordinate Coops had left him, and he had freed his elite squad of ex-Glitz pit fighters, too. Any one of his soldiers probably felt more loyalty to Ludwig than him now. Larry didn't mind. He wasn't a sensitive guy. No matter who came out on top in the end, 7 stars would still hold all the cards. Therefore, to win, the only logical answer was to join 7 stars. Larry easily located the elevator leading down to the underground base, although he didn't know the code. So he stood for a few minutes on the side of a misty street, surrounded by tall brick buildings and lit by pale yellow lanterns. Cap ghosts flew by him occasionally, giving him guarded looks. Eventually, the door to the hidden elevator simply opened. Larry took it down and found himself in a darkened corridor made of dark purple metal, dimly lit. Facing him a few meters away were 2 Koopas in purple uniforms with visors, fire or ice bros, by the looks of them, and another Koopa in an immaculate white suit.
Prince Larry Koopa. An unexpected guest, I will admit. I'm surprised you managed to discover the location of our headquarters. Never underestimate me.
He smirked.
No worries, though, I'm not about to rat on you to Ludwig. I've actually had it with my big brother. You guys are cooler, so I wanna join you. According to my intel, there are a few seats open on the board of directors now,
Skulls narrowed his eyes.
You're awfully bold.
He admitted.
I could kill you right now, but it would be a waste to dispose of a man of your talents. Perhaps this is a matter for the Grand Star.
He turned around and gestured for Larry to follow him.
Come now, after me. The Grand Star does not like to be kept waiting.